Welcome to the Ricefield Archive. This time, we return to colonial-era Vietnam for a Nam Cao short story, Watching Other People Be Happy, where a young man comes home with a broken heart, only to find a grandmother who treats grudges like a full-time job and a love that might be doomed before it even starts. And so, the story begins. Nguyen had tried to stop thinking about it, but the thought kept returning of its own accord. It returned once he no longer had to fight for space on the train, once he was sitting comfortably in a rickshaw that sped along toward his village. The countryside looked cheerful. Nguyen forced himself to think so. The sky was very blue, the air crystal clear. Under the wind, the fields rose and fell like the restless breast of the sea. There was sunlight, there were birds, the crunching of ox cart wheels over loose stones, voices and laughter. But how could an unfeeling landscape know anything? And as for the people framed within it, who could know what lay inside their hearts? Who could tell whether they were happy or sad? Take those laborers straining at the heavy cart over there. They were talking and laughing. They were making fun of a modern young woman in flimsy clothes who had just overtaken them on her bicycle. The women pushing the rice cart shrieked with laughter, as though they had been given a wonderfully amusing spectacle. Their laughter cracked through the air, and yet, quite possibly, it was only by laughing so loudly that they could force some of the bitterness out of their hearts. "What a life for a girl," one of them cried. Whose life did she mean? The leisurely life of the girl on the bicycle or her own? Did she despise the other woman or envy her? Perhaps the laughter of those laborers really was bitter. Or perhaps they were, laughing honestly and simply, and it was only Nguyen who was a pessimist. Whatever the truth, the sight made him think of Ching. Ching too liked riding bicycles. Ching too often wore light, close-fitting clothes, and more than once, with the wind and sunlight behaving shamelessly around her, Nguyen had sinned with his eyes and in his heart. Nguyen had known Ching for 3 years. She had come to Hanoi in search of work and freedom. Freedom above all. The work she found was not enough to support her, and every month she still had to ask her mother for extra money. Ching's mother was a wealthy widow in the countryside. She trusted her daughter completely because she herself was uneducated, while her daughter was learned. Ching had done well at school. She had earned a diploma that not a single young man in the whole canton had managed to obtain. She spoke French like a Frenchwoman. In Hanoi, Ching worked as a sales assistant in a Western pharmacy. Nguyen worked for an insurance company whose office was nearby. By chance, the two of them rented rooms in the same house. Ching lived upstairs and had her own entrance. Nguyen lived below. They became acquainted very quickly. Ching was a modern young woman, and Nguyen, whether or not his mind was truly modern, thought to himself that there could be no harm in getting to know her. Then, he fell in love with her. One evening, when Ching had no visitors, he told her of his love with perfect simplicity and frankness. Just as simply and frankly, he proposed that they make arrangements to marry. Ching did not gasp in surprise. She did not lower her eyes bashfully. She did not become angry. She smiled. While Nguyen went pale with emotion, Ching smiled with perfect calm and answered, "Thank you. I'm very grateful to you, but this is so difficult to say. You are a worthy man, but until now, I have only ever thought of you as a friend. As for the future, I cannot know. I sincerely hope that one day I shall love you. But for the present, perhaps you would be willing to wait." Very well, Nguyen would be willing to wait. He waited for 3 long years. Ching remained affectionate toward him and toward many other men as well. Then, all of a sudden, she married a wealthy foreigner, much older than herself, whom she had met only a few times. There was no shortage of wounded hearts, but naturally, Ngan's was the most deeply wounded. He remembered what Ching had told him. "I am so happy. You love me, so surely you want me to be happy. The happiness of the woman you love." Falsehood, what shameless falsehood. It was just like the lovers in novels who wept torrents of tears while telling some penniless sweetheart, "I must marry another man, but my soul will always belong to you." The absurdity of the thought made the corner of Ngan's mouth twitch into a smile, but it was a smile full of bitterness. Slowly his throat tightened, and the blood began to boil inside him. He hated Ching with all his heart, and through her he came to hate a whole class of modern young women with their affected romantic notions of love, their minds soaked in the opium brewed by novelists who spent their lives gazing at the moon. After passing through a crooked alley, Ngan entered the courtyard of his family home. The yard was as deserted as that of an abandoned house. There was no sign of his youngest brother, who would usually be laughing and wrestling with the black dog. Everything was too quiet. Several areca palms stood with yellowing leaves, drooping as though death had already climbed to their crowns. Suddenly, the black dog, which had been dozing in its kennel, lifted its head and gave several short barks. Then it wagged its tail in welcome. Ngan's mother hurried out from the kitchen, her hair stuck to her head with sweat and a pair of chopsticks still in her hand. She shook her head to warn Ngan not to speak yet, then pointed toward the main room. He understood immediately. Even before stepping over the threshold, he knew he would hear his grandmother moaning. He shook his head wearily. There were few occasions on which he returned home without hearing his grandmother groan. She suffered from a chronic illness that no medicine could cure, an illness forever threatening to return. Hatred of her own daughter. She had been born into suffering. Her father died while her mother was still pregnant with her. When she was 5, her mother remarried. Her uncles and aunts took turns raising the orphan child, one keeping her for 5 or 7 months, another for a year or 2. At last, when no one had any spare rice left with which to feed her, they sold her to a wealthy family as an adopted daughter. The rich family fed her and cursed and beat her until she was 17. Then they handed her over to her mother-in-law, who likewise fed her and cursed and beat her, above all, cursed and beat her. At 21, after 5 attempts to throw herself into the river, the wretched young woman gave birth to a child. She was sickly and now had a child to care for, so her mother-in-law could no longer get much work out of her. She was therefore allowed to set up a separate household with her husband. Then it was her husband's turn to torment her. He gambled, he drank, he stole his wife's money. The family was in turmoil all year round. The wife nagged the husband cursed and beat the wife. Their child was covered in sores and whimpered day and night. At last the husband lost heavily in a gambling session and fled the village, leaving his wife and infant child burdened with all his debts. Every day 3 or 4 creditors came to the house to abuse and threaten her. Her husband was not dead, yet the young woman suddenly found herself a widow. Because she had suffered throughout her life, Ngan's grandmother could no longer believe that anyone else suffered at all. Everyone in her household was far too fortunate, from the servant girl upward. The servant, she said, was living like an immortal in heaven, and her daughter and son-in-law most of all. Good heavens, they remained forever as young as bamboo shoots. They had nothing to worry about. They never cursed or beat each other. The wife spoiled her husband disgracefully. She bought wine for him. When he had drunk it, he stroked her cheek. Then, The two of them grinned foolishly at each other like children, though they were both over 40. Good heavens, she had suffered her whole life, saving every last coin, only so that now they might enjoy themselves. They were too happy. Did they not know that their mother had suffered all her life? The poison had seeped into her slowly. At first it worked in silence, but it sank deeper and deeper until at last her sickness of resentment burst out into the open. Ngan approached the bed. The old woman groaned loudly, pretending not to see him. Ngan had to speak first. "What is the matter again, grandmother?" She turned her face away and whimpered. "Is that you, my child? I'm dying." She began to sob and seized his hand. In the past, such a sight would invariably have brought tears to Ngan's eyes. Now it only irritated him. He had seen the same scene repeated too many times. He suppressed his anger so that his voice would not sound harsh. "Why do you keep thinking about father and mother?" "My poor child, you must understand. Other people have 5 or 7 children. If they lose one, they still have another. But I have only one daughter, and your mother has only one mother. I sacrifice everything to provide for your parents, yet now she is so ungrateful that she has not the slightest pity for me. They think only of their own comfort. They would not care if their mother shriveled up and died before their eyes. Your father does nothing but drink. After 3 cups, he starts boasting, and in no time he has raised himself all the way to heaven. He talks nonsense and behaves disgracefully. I feel ashamed whenever I think what other people must say. I have told his wife again and again to restrain him little by little. But instead of restraining him, your mother buys plenty of wine for him to drink. She would never dare utter a word against so much as one hair on his body, because she is afraid he might leave her. My own husband left me when I was only 23, yet I did not starve. I still managed to raise your mother and establish a life for her." Ngan stared blankly and sighed. His grandmother was always thinking about the husband who had betrayed her, and always found it painful that some women had husbands less treacherous than her own. The conversation gradually changed direction. After complaining and receiving comforting words from Ngan, the old woman recovered her strength and felt lighter at heart. She began thinking again about how to secure her grandson's happiness. "Ngan, you ought to have some pity for me. I am old and weak now, ill one day and aching the next. I cannot rely on your parents. You are the only one I have left, and you are always away. Perhaps I could take you to Hanoi with me." "Yes, but you must get married first. You ought to listen to me. That girl is exceptionally good, pretty, gentle, and well-behaved." On any other occasion, Ngan would have dismissed the suggestion. This time, however, he stopped to consider it. The girl was Zuyen. She was an orphan, and her house stood next to his. When Zuyen's father was alive, the two families had been close, but Ngan himself had never been close to her. Sent to town while still a child, he had never imagined that he might one day marry a country girl like Zuyen. Zuyen understood none of this. She continued visiting Ngan's family. She grew close to his grandmother. The old woman pitied Zuyen because her circumstances reminded her of her own youth. She loved the girl dearly and had tried many times to persuade her grandson to marry her. "You ought to pity me and pity her as well. Whenever you are away, whenever I grow dizzy or feverish, she is the only one who looks after me. There are very few people who know how to value another human being as she does. She has treated you with kindness, so you ought to repay her with kindness. She speaks of you all the time. Think about it. She's been waiting for you for so many years." Ngan felt a little sad. He thought of Ching. He too had waited patiently and longingly. Suddenly he felt sorry for Zuyen. Zuyen's love was simple and rustic. It had no artifice and no philosophy. She loved him because heaven had made her that way. Ngan was thoroughly weary of the sort of people who could never love without philosophizing about love. Why should he not marry Zuyen? Seeing that her grandson was wavering, the old woman pressed him. "You agree then? Say that you agree so I can tell her and make her happy." Ngan nodded, and at once a sigh escaped him. Why? He could not understand it himself. It seemed that he had agreed unwillingly. It seemed that he was sad. He had a vague feeling that he would suffer and that he would make another person suffer, which would be more painful still. Love as it existed among human beings, was something immeasurably sad. Zuyen spent some of her savings on several beautiful custard apples, the finest in the market, and brought them to Ngan's grandmother. The old woman smiled. For a single moment, she remembered the time when love had first begun to bud in her own heart. Only for a moment. Then, the corners of her mouth sagged into a bitter arch. The bitterness had already entered her blood. She broke open one of the custard apples and ate it. Then she chose an especially fine one and handed it to Ngan. "This one is ripe. It is just right for eating." Ngan took it. Zuyen blushed slightly and stole a glance at him, happy and bashful. How beautiful Zuyen was. How beautiful her love was. Ngan ate slowly. The fruit was richly sweet and gave off a delicate fragrance. His face brightened, as though a flame had been lit somewhere inside him. He smiled at Zuyen. She grew even shyer, her cheeks turning redder. She lowered her face and played with the end of the old woman's silk sash. Then she said with an embarrassed little laugh, "Grandmother, rice is terribly dear today. 1 jong will not even buy 11 measures." "Goodness, my family has already had to mix in more maize." Ngan looked at Zuyen with pity, but the old woman said, "Nonsense, child. Young people are better off eating maize. It keeps the stomach full. When I was young, I did not even have maize rice to eat. We often had nothing but pennywort porridge instead of a proper meal." Ngan's younger sister brought an envelope into the house. The old woman asked, "Whose letter is that?" "It's from Brother Ngan." "Open it and see what he says. I wonder what has happened now. He only left last Sunday." The granddaughter opened the envelope. As she read silently, a knowing smile appeared on her lips. "What is it?" the old woman asked. "It's a letter for Sister Zuyen. He says he's arranging the money for their wedding. As soon as they are married, he will take her to Hanoi." The old woman's face immediately darkened. Her lower lip pushed outward slightly. She ordered the girl to read the letter aloud. The granddaughter read with some embarrassment, for it was filled entirely with words of affection. "My dearest, your loving, I promise that I shall do everything in my power to make you happy. I am arranging the money for our wedding. I shall bring you to Hanoi so that we may always be together. Always together." The old woman felt her chest grow hot as though a fire were burning inside it. She was furious with her grandson, so he had gone bad as well. They were not even married yet, and already he was indulging his wife. Before long, she would have put a ring through his nose and be leading him wherever she pleased. "I promise that I shall do everything in my power to make you happy." So that was what Zuyen was really like. "I shall bring you to Hanoi." A creature like her going to Hanoi. Was such a thing ever heard of? Was such a thing ever heard of? The old woman spat out bitterly. She must have been whispering and flattering him behind my back. She is desperate to go to Hanoi, is she? Well, I shall tell her plainly. Once they are married, I will make her stay here and serve me for 14 full years. And so ends Watching Other People Be Happy, a story of love, old wounds, and how difficult it can be to watch someone else find happiness. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing for more Vietnamese literature and forgotten stories. Thank you for listening.